And I'm recording, yeah.
Yeah.
It just says network is struggling, but it's starting to work, I guess. I don't know. We're just gonna have to wing it, dude.
Let's just wing it.
All right, dude. How about this? You take us away.
Okay, everybody. So welcome back to the Living a Stream podcast. I'm your host, one of your hosts, Eric Harrison, and with me, Josh is feeling a little under the weather today, as usual. So,
Oh my gosh.
I'm taking the intro over because his voice isn't quite back to normal yet. Talk to the people, Josh.
We have to save this. We got to save this voice for the important stuff.
You actually sound sick.
Because I'm on the same weather. It's not that the weather has changed. I've been under it for a while, and it's lingering, dude. It's just I've given up, dude. My lungs broke, my body shut down. I'm permanently gonna be. It's not even being sick. It's just now my normal.
This is a permanent intro to the show. Is like talking about your health. Because I think
know,
for the
people are probably sick.
the last 4 weeks. Okay, so today we're going to talk about Dune, everybody. Dune 1 and a little bit about Dune 2 because I'm not going to be able to help myself. Dune Part 2. But first, Joshua, how are things?
Dude, things are okay. Yeah, besides this lung issue I haven't ran in like over a month. I've gone on some
Really?
walks. Yeah, dude. I'm telling you, my lungs have just said F you and I'm no longer gonna work.
Have you tried it? Have you tried to run and it wasn't successful? Like,
I'm afraid that they're gonna burst. Is that possible? Like, can your lungs explode
definitely.
if you're not underwater?
Definitely possible.
Because I feel like if I go running outside, and we're supposed to have the worst storm in a very long time. Like,
What?
I'm talking not visible, the world shutting down. They said like 4 feet in the mountains, like Golden, which is
When?
right outside, starting tonight and tomorrow.
No way.
It's supposed to be like winter is coming, Game of Thronesy. Like, we're about to go into the depths and the darkness of winter, dude.
Oh, just brutal. Look at that. Disgusting.
Dude, I don't even know. Dude, here's the bad thing. I don't even know about these things until people start telling me about them. They're like, don't you check your weather app? And I'm like, nope.
No.
That's probably not a good thing. Also, oh my gosh, how am I doing, dude? Dude, Robinhood. I know it's been a while since Dumb Money, since we talked about this. But one of the stocks that I happen to have that I've sat on for too long was $1.30 on March 11th, on Monday. Yesterday, it hit over $3.
Did you sell it?
No, because I'm still a negative. It's gone up.
What did you buy it
went
at?
up 94%, and then it is now up 61% as of the last few days. And I want to say they did a reverse split, and I say that like I know what it means, but I don't. A 1-to-10 reverse split back in 2022. So I have no idea what my original buy was, but right now it's saying my average cost per share is $7.49. I'm negative 67% still. This is what happens when you don't check your stock.
Josh.
But
oh, dude. Oh,
it used to be 90% negative. So now 67, if you think about it, that's like pretty good.
it's going to go back down. Was there a reason for it going up?
Well, I think their quarterly stuff, their Q1, Q2, all those Qs, they're all really high. And then they have something going on. Their actual EPS is on 321 in the after hours.
And it's going to bomb at that point. You know, every time. Even if they're great, it's like, cool, I made my money, and people bounce out. Dude, oh.
Maybe it's that. Because its average volume is 8 million, and it did like over 160 million in trading yesterday.
Wow.
So maybe it is what you're saying, but who knows, dude? Maybe it's because they believe in it. They believe in the stock. I like the stock, as our Paul Dano friend says. And maybe I just need to get on Reddit. Start,
They're all in prison,
Never
dude.
mind.
They're all in
this
prison.
is how I'm going to go to prison.
Oh my God, your lungs, dude.
Oh, I'm going to die, dude. Don't make me laugh too hard. But anyways, that's some good news. That's how that's going. And like you said, well, one, before I talk about how many times I've watched Dune 2 and been very irresponsible, because there's so much I need to be doing, from school, from work, to papers, to blogs, to essays, to newsletters. I have a lot going on, and I've literally thrown it to the wayside. I can't even tell people like, hey, sorry, I've been busy, because I've watched it multiple times
How
on
many?
IMAX. But that being said, you finally watched it, correct?
Yeah, we watched it. Not this Sunday. The Sunday it came out.
Okay. Okay. Are you gonna keep this to a spoiler free, or are you just gonna
Dude,
go?
I'm not going to. No,
You're
we
just gonna
will
say some.
spoiler free as much as possible.
Okay, spoiler free. Okay, you're right. It's still a couple weeks in, so we don't want to ruin souls here.
It's the biggest thing I'll talk about is performances because, well, I know we're not even into Dune 1 yet. Like, this is so hard because Dune 2 is so fresh in my mind, you know?
That's okay. We can play backwards, dude. We'll start with Dune 2, and when nothing makes sense. These our shows are chaotic enough, dude.
I
So
love it. Okay, but to start, do you think because the Oscars just happened, which shout out, okay, we're
oh
gonna
yeah,
pause. We're gonna pause and review the Oscars. So, in watching Ryan Gosling's "I'm Just Ken" performance, well,
love it.
I saw a tweet that made me die, and it was basically talking about how much stage presence Ryan Gosling had, and how if his voice was just that much better, he would take over the pop industry. And basically, it said Justin Timberlake should count his lucky stars that Gosling didn't have pipes like him because he really just ruled it, man. I saw an angle from I think it was Martin Scorsese's granddaughter who attended the Oscars with him,
Okay.
and like he's enjoying it, and just like it was an angle from the crowd, and he ruled that performance, man. But my favorite moment of the night was the most anticlimactic presentation of Best Picture ever with Al Pacino. That was just, I mean, nothing can compare to La La Land's mishap a few years back,
Correct.
right? But
Correct.
like this was amazing. Just
Oh, it was
I see
incredible.
Oppenheimer, and just like no one knew what
My
to do.
eyes. Well, okay. So apparently, I saw on Twitter too that Al Pacino released a statement saying that was a producer's choice because the
Ah,
producers said that they showed clips throughout the night and they showed examples of every nominee from the best pictures throughout the night. So when Al Pacino went to present, all he had to do was read the card. But that being said, too, it's still really funny.
just the way he read
Even
it.
even just the way he read it, he goes, "My eyes see Oppenheimer." No,
And then
seriously.
he
And then
kept
it
trying
just
to
was like, "What?"
mumble, like as they're applauding. Eventually, they start applauding, and the music. He's trying to mumble something. Like, I don't.
Yeah. Excuse you?
Hello. Anyways, I had a bubbles, but that was hilarious. I didn't go back and look at the newsletter, which temporary plug to the Three Milks Media Sweet and Condensed. If you haven't checked it out, um, last week was a fun one. It was Kung Fu Panda, and
Yep.
then we did some Oscar predictions. So were your predictions accurate? I think all of us were spot on.
Yeah. Yeah. As much as I wanted I went as much as I wanted Ryan Gosling or someone else to win. I mean, I'm happy for Robert Downey Jr. I am. I think it's exciting. He's been around for a long time,
Yeah.
and so that is exciting. So there's no hate towards him, but I did say that he was going to win. But dude, I wanted to be surprised. I wanted to stand up and cheer for Ryan Gosling, dude.
That would have been
Sterling K.
incredible.
Brown too. I was really pulling for a 1% underdog there,
I'm sorry. Tell me the other
but
nominee
yeah,
other than Sterling K. Brown. Who was the fourth?
it was Robert De Niro and Sterling K. Brown, Ryan Gosling.
Wow, I forgot
Who was
Robert
the
De
other?
Niro
Oh,
was
Mark
one.
Ruffalo. Mark Ruffalo.
Ruffalo?
Dude, he was so I think it's
Oh.
Ruffalo. But Buffalo? Mark Ruffalo was very, very good in Poor Things, dude. To be honest, too, he could have easily also deserved it. That's what was hard, dude. There were so many good performances this year that I think even a nomination felt like a win in some ways. In most categories. Not all categories, but in most categories.
Yeah, I think I was texting you back and forth like the best actress category, right? You know, initially people thought it was going to go to Lily, but I haven't seen Poor Things, so I cannot speculate. Which I'll have to watch it. It's
Yeah.
free on Hulu now. Um, as to whether or not, I mean, you know, you said, and a lot of people were saying Emma Stone was just brilliant in Poor Things, so I'll have to see it. But there were so many good. My fault. There were so many good nominations, like you said, and Best Picture too. Like we all knew it was going to go to Oppenheimer, but
Yeah.
someone was saying that Oppenheimer's cast this year felt like Michael Jordan in the 90s, where like he just prevented so many other great players from winning a championship, and where this year Oppenheimer just swept in so many areas and so many awards this season that just prevented other great movies, not in a bad way, but just other great movies that were also nominated in various categories and awards. Just Wrong year, bad timing,
Yeah.
right?
Right. I mean, you just never know what's going to do well, and you never know what's coming out. And I think how wild it would have been if Dune Part 2 would have came out last year as it was expected, and if it wasn't delayed.
Nuts.
Because then what do you do? Like the last time, I believe Dune Part 1 was nominated for 11. It won 6 Oscars. Oppenheimer won 7, and I believe it got nominated for at least 10 Oscars. And so I think Part 2, if I can say so early on in this episode, I think it's a better movie.
Yeah.
But so I'm assuming it's going to get a relatively like similar amount of nominations.
Someone was saying that because there's a third part with Messiah that is speculated and almost obviously going to come out eventually, similar to Lord of the Rings, it was Return of the King. Like the third movie in the trilogy is really what did it in the awards season. And so the
Yeah.
question is, will we wait for Messiah to see that happen? I don't feel that way because I think this movie was just so good on its own. I don't know. That's my thought. I
Right.
like 20 years ago when Return of the King came out, I wasn't really paying attention to the Oscars, but in reading about it, it was like there's been a lot of comparisons. Will Messiah be that for Dune? But I don't know, man. There were way too many performances in this, and it's someone brought up Succession on Twitter too. Shout out Twitter, man. That's where I get all my gears going. Where Succession had so many support, like it was
Yeah.
supporting cast members who could have been competing against each other in categories and did in the award season. So Dune, same way, right? Like supporting actor. Is
Yeah.
it like who gets that nomination?
Right. Well, and I tried leaving Twitter and it's impossible. I was like full ready to leave Twitter, go to Threads. I was like, I don't like where it's going. What is X?
Yeah.
Still calling it Twitter.
Me too. Yeah,
But then
right.
I just can't. I just can't leave it. So I'm back. I'm still on there. But anyways, shout out Twitter. And yeah, I think that's what was tough too. I mean, just in general, like, because I know the actor the people get to decide what they're going to campaign for.
Yeah.
Because some people were even saying about Lily should have campaigned for supporting actress, not actress in a lead role. But at the same time, she is a lead in terms of that story, right? Like maybe she doesn't have the same screen time. I can see an argument for both, right? Because some people say the lead is screen time. Who's the story around? And yes, the story was about like Leonardo DiCaprio's character, but I think too of the overarching story, I was like, you can argue that Lily's character was 100% like the central aspect of this story on the bigger outside of Leonardo DiCaprio's story arc. So yeah, there is that amount of time, because you look at Emma Stone, who's in it for a majority of the whole movie, and having to hold the screen, hold attention, to engage, and to be a different character too in each act, because like the way the movie is, without completely spoiling it, her mind does develop over the whole movie. So she has to perform as somebody with like the mind of an infant, the mind of a child, the mind of an adolescent, the mind of, as it's developed. So like there is like, not to say that like is always going to trump a straight up performance. I'm just saying that there's more dynamics that are going on than just, you have this character.
Yeah.
For this movie. But Emma Stone had to, like I mentioned, she had to be captivating and act on all these different levels for a majority of the movie. But that's not to belittle Lily Gladstone's performance, even though she wasn't in, well, how long was that? I was like, dude, she's in a feature length amount of time. She's just not in this feature length amount of time, because this movie was 3.5 hours long. But that being said though, dude, I think, it's hard, because I think Dune Part 2, there was so many, Timmy's obviously the lead, but like everyone's a support then, and then everyone, do you just nominate everyone? Does everyone campaign for that? It'll be interesting to see who ends up getting nominations for that.
Like, is it?
And
is
I
it
did want to say though.
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
You did want to say what?
Oh no, I was gonna change back to the whole sequel thing. So,
tell me.
Okay, so what you had mentioned, I thought that waiting for Messiah, right? Because in my gut, I should have trusted my gut, dude. I thought Boy and the Heron was gonna win Best Animated Feature, which seemed just outlandish considering Across the Spider-Verse and all the praise it was getting, all the awards it was getting. I think it got like the Producers Guild of America award, which historically that award and 2 other ones that Across the Spider-Verse won meant that it was going to get the Oscar. But for some reason, in my heart, I was like, I don't know, Boy and the Heron. I think the Boy and the Heron's going to win it. And I didn't, dude. I put down Across the Spider-Verse, and Boy and the Heron ended up surprising us and winning, right? But New Mexico Drew was telling me, he's like, well, that's on par because most trilogies, the middle one gets overlooked, just like you were saying. Return of the King, Lord of the Rings, Fellowship, Lord of the Rings, Return of the King, Two Towers got less recognition. And very often does the second movie in a trilogy get more recognition and notoriety or whatever, right?
Yeah.
But that being said, I don't know, dude. I think this might be different because part two, I heard an interview where Denis said that he wanted this one to be standalone. Part one, Dune, was more like an appetizer to the whole world, but he wanted people to be able to sit down and have the main course of Dune Part 2 without even having to watch Dune Part 1. And I think they did a decent job of accomplishing that after watching Dune Part 2.
Yeah.
And so that being said, yes, it's going to be a trilogy, but I feel like they only announced it. Maybe they had plans the whole time to be a trilogy, but it seemed like they're like, well, we got to see how Dune 1 goes, because Dune Part 1's even just called Dune. Like the title isn't called Dune Part 2 or Part 1. So I feel like they decided that after the fact. Then after this one went really good, they're like, okay, now let's greenlight Messiah. So I don't know. So anyways, does it hold true? Basically what I'm saying, does it hold true to the normal path that trilogies have taken? I think we will see Dune Part 2 get more nominations, get more recognition, and potentially more wins, even though the first Dune got 6. And Oppenheimer got 7 this year. So they're pretty close.
And you bring up a good point. So not to call her out, but Kelly hadn't seen Dune 1. And so I explained to her a little bit and showed her a few clips, like meaningful parts the day before we were going to go see it. I was like, you just need a little bit of context. And I obviously didn't do a good job. I showed her a few clips here and there and explained her the story. And I didn't even know the story. And she loved it. And then she got into the story after the second one. So like, to his credit, saying that you don't necessarily need to, you can, and it's important, and it's probably good to, but you don't have to. And I don't know, based on the box office numbers, there's no way that there was the same following, right? Maybe some people, I've talked to some friends who are going to try to watch the first one who haven't seen it before they watch the second one. Some who haven't, they're just going in blind. And so to me, that's a testament to how good the storytelling is in this movie. So obviously, you get a lot of closed loops and full circle moments and really fun moments if you've seen the first one. But if you haven't, you can still just enjoy this like incredible blockbuster film, you know? So
Right.
as you're saying that, it makes sense that that was kind of his intention, where it's a possibility to enjoy.
Right. So I think that gives, high hopes that before we even see Messiah, I think this one will do well.
Yeah.
Not that awards are everything, because as you can tell, I think people are hyped about it no matter what.
Oh yeah.
Because I think some movies, obviously, I think people don't watch movies and then the Oscars happen and you get a little buzz and then they either re-release, re-put, and then you watch it. Dune Part 2 is not, not one of those movies.
No, absolutely not. So question, since we're technically covering Dune 1 in this and also talking Dune 2, when you first watched Dune 1, would you have considered that a full watch? What were your feelings on it initially, right? When you first, did you see it in theaters? Actually, is a good question.
Yeah, I did. So what happened was, so Dune 1, it was interesting because it came out in 2021. So a year into the pandemic or after the pandemic, or almost 2 years. But yet things were still things like cinemas and theaters were still like shut down in some regard, not fully, but not a lot of people were going to theaters, right? We were looking at numbers the other day, and I think we talked about it, I'm thinking, in the last episode, right? 200,000 or 200 million ticket sales in 2020, the year before it was $1 billion.
Yeah.
So anyways, they were releasing Dune straight to streaming on Max at the same time of releasing in theaters. And it was a Friday. I was working from home. I heard the roommate, we had a projector and like a movie, big giant projector and sounds in our living room. And I heard the roommate playing it and I was like, I think that's Dune. And then I was like, that is definitely Dune. I can't work. Like, I'm going to hear and it's going to spoil stuff. So I just went directly to the theaters, dude, and began being irresponsible. Dune's just making me irresponsible no matter what year it is. But I went to the theaters. I watched it at the Windrock
Oh, nice.
in Albuquerque, East Side Albuquerque. Went home and watched it on streaming that night, like almost back to back. And yeah, I think more so it was a full watch, more so than I think maybe it made me more emotional, and I was more like I felt more maybe than Dune Part 2. And what I mean by that is, I know it sounds wild. Dune Part 2 to me is a better movie. I will say that. But Dune Part 1 introduced me to the world, and it was slower, and it felt more like I was slowly being invited and peering into this world that I literally had no desire or any idea what it was.
Mm.
And I think because of all of that, there was something more magical about it that I think made it more so a full watch. Because in Dune Part 2, I didn't like cry, but I got teary at a couple parts. Dune Part 1, there's a couple parts that like, yeah, really messed me up. But
In Dune 1? So tell me in Dune 1, what got you in Dune 1?
okay, well, yeah, first off though, okay, before we do that, let me read the
Oh,
description
yeah,
of
we
Dune.
haven't even got
So the son of a noble family travels to dangerous planet to ensure the future of his people in the visually stunning sci-fi epic. That is from Max because it's streaming on Max. I believe it's also streaming on Hulu and streaming elsewhere. Maybe Netflix. Anyways, it's streaming in a lot of
Netflix too.
places. I watched it on Max and it's on Hulu. It got a 83 on Rotten Tomatoes, 500 reviews, 90% from the audience. It's starring like a million people. It's written and directed by Denis Villeneuve. Villeneuve? How do you say that? I know it's French and he's Canadian.
I have no idea.
Like the Mexican side of me wants to do Denis Villeneuve, but I
Villeneuve.
don't think that's what it is. And then Eric Roth also helped write the screenplay, and Eric Roth did like Forrest Gump, Killers of the Flower Moon. So he's also a big screenplay writer he's done a lot of big movies. But it's starring Timothée Chalamet, Rebecca Ferguson, Zendaya, Oscar Isaac, Jason Momoa, Stellan Skarsgård, Josh Brolin, Stephen McKinley Henderson, Javier Bardem, Sharon Duncan Brewster. Dude, there's like Dave Bautista. It like goes on and on. And Dune Part 2, I feel like is very similar, even though, yeah. So, no, I guess ruining anything before we get there. But, and David Dastmalchian. That being said, your question was, what was it? And again, I think this scene might be the most powerful scene for me. From here on out, we are going to ruin Dune Part 1. I won't ruin Dune Part 2, though. It was at the beginning, dude. I think the fact that so you have Oscar Isaac's character who is leading this whole world, right? So there's the Dune world, which again, I didn't read the book. I knew nothing about it. But what I was picking up the first time I watched it, I'm like, oh, there's like houses. It's like Games of Thronesy, where there's like these different houses. They have their own planets. The Duke, Leto, is very important, and he's a strong figure. He has a family, and he's a good person, is what I picked up from the movie, like pretty quickly. He's a good person. Lady Jessica, who is his concubine, she's into some Benny Gesserit secret society looking thing. So I couldn't tell, like, is this good? Is this bad? But Duke Leto was like, I'm like, okay, this is a good person. He's a dad. And when he has that scene when they're about to go off world, they're about to go to Arrakis, the planet they call Dune, where the home of the Fremen, where they mine the spice. It's very important, very precious. They're mining it, and it's like screwing over a bunch of people. The Duke's having a walk with his son before they go to Arrakis, and he says to his son, he says to Timmy, saying like, one day you're gonna have to answer the call, like to being a leader or not. And Timmy, well, Paul, right? Paul's like, well, what if I don't want to? He goes, that's okay. Your grandpa didn't want it either. And he's like, what? I didn't know that. He's like, yeah, like one day you're going to have to answer this call of leadership. And just so you know, whether you say yes or no, like you'll still be everything I need you to be. And that is my son. And that moment, there's so many things. I think spiritually, and then like literally, I think that like that was a huge part for me. And something, shameless plug again, with the newsletter, we're introducing a new section, Red Cap Essays, where they'll be released whenever we want, irregularly. Can't say that word. But it'll all be somewhere around, we're trying to figure out life, and sometimes movies help us do that, and we're just going to be essays around cinema, the general idea of cinema and how we participate and engage with cinema. And so this is something, the reason I bring that up is that this idea is probably going to be expounded into a fuller essay, for a red cap essay. But that just meant a lot to me, of like, oh, like when I was a kid, I wanted to be a lawyer. I wanted to, be an astronaut or whatever, having these jobs. But then I, got out of college. I did Young Life, which was a very unconventional job. Didn't have an office. I created my own schedule. I basically, it looked like from the outside looking in, I just hung out, and that's all I did with my life, and raised money. And so I think, and then going into the entrepreneurship and just self-employed stuff, there's always a joke with my family where I'm like, my parents don't really know what I do. So that just was really cool hearing, and I'm in a place where my parents, I think even they gave me a birthday card at this last birthday when I turned 32. They're like, even though we still don't know what you do, like, we're very proud of you. And I think that moment was so huge in Dune, to see that on the screen in 2021 of, hey, even if we don't know what you do, like, if you say no to leadership, you say no to these positions. And I know we talk about this almost, it seems like every other podcast, but
Mm.
that scene really like hit home. And I think especially when we think about spirituality, and when you go through being, you know, being called or being used or doing good for God. Well, what if I'm doing nothing? Like, what if I'm just me? What if I'm just existing? Does that make me less? Does that make me like, what's my perspective of a loving God, if there is a loving God, if I think he only loves me if I say yes to leadership and if I do good things, and if I'm doing stuff, like, existing is not enough. But hearing that in that movie, it was like, existing is enough. Anyways, that was a long tangent, or a long explanation to your what you asked. But
No, that's great. That makes so much
um
sense because it feels like in the second movie there wasn't as much of that. There were a lot of callbacks to his dad and with his ring. What did he? I might be butchering. Well, you can cut this out if it's a spoiler, but he has his dad's ring and he says, "Father, I found my way," or something. Is that something along those lines? You know what I'm talking
I
about
think maybe, yeah, yeah,
in the
yeah, yeah.
second movie? But yeah, anyways, but that makes sense that you felt that a lot more in the first, and then you have such a stark difference in the Baron and how they just how he treats his nephews and people, and
Yeah.
again, yeah, too many spoilers if I go into that, I guess. Um, so I'll stop that tangent. But my mind immediately went there when you said that. But yeah, that's great. That makes a lot of sense. I don't think the first one was a full watch for me because I watched it. I don't know. I went into it with this frame of mind expecting some. Okay, full disclosure, I didn't watch it in 2021. I watched it a couple of weeks ago in anticipation of Dune 2. With that in mind, there was so much excitement around Dune 2. So watching Dune 1 felt underwhelming for me because I didn't
Mm,
understand the world like you said, and I went into it with certain expectations and it wanting something specific out of it. Now, I loved Star Wars growing up. I haven't watched many of the recent versions, so I couldn't tell you if they're good or bad. Maybe The Force Awakens I've seen, but I know there's a lot of other versions and shows on Disney Plus. I couldn't speak to those. Was a huge Lord of the Rings guy, still am. I love those movies. I will rewatch them tonight, any night of the week. And so I almost went in with this frame of mind, like comparing it to that fantasy world that I like, which is Lord of the Rings. That's like people have there's Harry Potter heads, and there's just different fantasy worlds that people will cling to from childhood on, or just as adults that they find. So I went into it with this frame of mind, like, am I going to get out of it what I get out of Lord of the Rings? And two, there was so much excitement around the second part of Dune. I watched it with that, and I was super underwhelmed because of that. And so, you and I had
mm,
very different perspectives after watching it. And so, I think that is sometimes such a bummer for me watching a movie with expectations. It's so hard for me not to do that, man, because I will read too much. I am too what do they say? They're chronically online. That is me. And I
yeah.
hate it because it sometimes ruins the movie experience for me where a decade ago it didn't happen. Yes, some social media existed 10 years ago, but now you open up TikTok and within 2 minutes you're getting a breakdown of every movie and scene and how it made you feel. And I'm like, I haven't even seen it yet, but now I have this other person's perspective in my brain. And so I wouldn't say the first one was a full watch for me, but that's my own fault. I watched it with certain intentions, a certain lens, sort of, with Lord of the Rings and how that made me feel, and like this nostalgia from childhood. And Kelly will tell you, I am super obnoxious in how I consume sci-fi or fantasy movies now. And she jokes with me, she's like, "Everything's not Lord of the Rings." And I don't know what that means, but she's right. Because sometimes I have that she's like absolutely right when she says that, because I will always compare movies to other movies that I've seen, and that's not right. But anyways, in watching Dune 2 and then circling back on Dune 1 for a rewatch, in anticipation of this episode for a rewatch, I loved it. And like that sounds sucky to say, and it's like, oh, bandwagon, whatever. And I just wasn't in the right frame of mind with Dune 1. I was like wanting Dune 2 and wanting the
Yeah.
experience like the pre-screenings had given people for Dune 2 when I saw it. Um, the performances were obviously fantastic. My first viewing for sure too. Um, but like the whole commentary around Dune, or I'm sorry, in Dune 1, the whole commentary around the second one was just how incredible overall the movie was, and so that's where I went into Dune 1. But um, Oscar Isaac was so fantastic in the first Dune, and again, are we spoiling the first Dune?
I think so. I mean,
Dune 1.
yes, yes.
I was really, really, really crushed, I will say, especially upon my rewatch. Um, when he finds out he's betrayed, and forgive me, what's the gentleman's name who implants the tooth?
Uh, Doctor Yu.
Dr. Yu. That scene was, that's where I felt, I think, the most emotion because, to your point, as the Duke, Oscar Isaac's character did seem like such a genuine person in this world that they created. And again, I had already seen Dune 2 and it was a rewatch for me, but this world of just dictators and like the barons and hateful people, he's the Duke upon rewatch. I had so much like sympathy in that scene of what was happening to somebody who seemed to be like motivated by the right things. And so that was when he
Mm,
was being betrayed, and that he was implanting that tooth, and when he bit down on the tooth in front of the bear in that moment, I felt like this pride inside of me. I just knew upon my first watch and the rewatch, obviously, that nothing was gonna happen to the Baron. But, like, I think in the first movie, that was really the scene that got me when he was there kind of helpless and the doctor was putting the tooth in, kind of explaining to him, "Hey, I'm
mm,
so sorry." Um, you're just imagining these things in his brain upon the first watch and rewatch, like, what I've done for my people, how I've treated people, like, is this like, how am I gonna go out like this almost, right? And I'm not trying to, like, belittle that, but
right.
it's kudos to Oscar Isaac's performance in that, where his physically so lifeless, his eyes told such a story that invoked this emotion of, like, he's like, "How could you be doing this to me?" Um, and then when you jump to the scene where he bites down the tooth in order like, "Hey, I'm gonna take you down with me," his eyes told this other story of, like, of that. You're going down with me, right? So, I think Oscar Isaac in both of those scenes invoked so much emotion from me, and he wasn't even moving. It was his eyes, right? And so,
Right.
thinking back to, like, emotional scenes in the first one, those got me, man, because he's just so lifeless and powerless when he's paralyzed physically, but his face was just giving such a good performance there, and then also when he's trying to take the Baron and that whole room down with him. Um, I thought those were great. But yeah, speaking of emotion being invoked, like that was those are some gnarly scenes. So shout out Oscar Isaac, who's obviously fantastic in most of his movies.
Yeah, I love Oscar Isaac. And speaking of that, I forwarded you an email too. Ex Machina, they're remastering it for IMAX because Oscar Isaac's in it. That's my bridge.
Let's go.
March 27th, 7 p.m. It's only one day. It's a Wednesday, March 27th at 7 p.m. In Albuquerque. It's a Regal Windrock and AMC South Valley. But anyways, besides the point, Oscar Isaac,
Let's
phenomenal. He
go. I
crushes in
love
that
that.
movie. He crushed in this movie. But yeah, I think they did a great job too of building up loyalty. Like I
Mm.
think the world, the reason I really, really loved Dune 1, the pacing of it was much
Yeah.
slower. I think, but it gave us the opportunity to really peer into this world and literally physically, because also I didn't shout him out in the beginning of this one. The cinematographer, Greg Fraser, absolutely crushed
Mm.
the images for this movie, and then also Hans Zimmer with the music.
Oh,
Like they're such incredible characters for this movie. Like every shot just feels just beautiful, immense. And I think too, I watched this TikTok where they're saying both part one and part two. The ability when you make a movie on scale, talking about like worlds and
Mm,
traveling and intergalactic travel and having this vast desert and the size of these worms that are looked at as the creator and as God. There's a lot of scale to it. So the ability to just show that on literally using a wide frame, but then also showing intimacy in scenes, we're doing close-ups. They just did such a good job of balancing, I think,
yeah.
that and showing how like Dr. Yu was helping Paul Atreides, the son, when he's about to be tested by the Reverend Mother at the very, very beginning. He like I forget what he does, but he gives them some insight, like or he speaks like a they speak like 50 languages, I feel like, but he whispers to him something very secretive to help him. And then also like the what's it, Thufir Hawat, his mentat, he's played by Stephen McKinley Henderson. He's also a teacher in Lady Bird. He's one of the best, dude. His when he goes to resign, he's like, I'm gonna resign because I let you down. Like you can just there's these little moments between Dr. Yu, between Thufir, between Josh Brolin's character. I always forget his name. Gurney Halleck,
Oh,
and
yeah.
then Duncan Idaho. Like all these people are so loyal to the Duke. Like that is their
Mm,
Duke. That is their person, their friend, and I think that made that scene like you're talking about hurt that much
oh,
more
yeah.
when he is betrayed. And even just the hopelessness, because there's a part of me's like, you got to know the Baron Harkonnen has a terrible reputation.
Yeah.
There's probably no way he's
Oh,
going to go through with
yeah, that
this,
was brutal too with the Dr. Yu.
right?
Oof.
Dr. Yu, just his wife, because he's doing it all because his wife is held captive by Harkonnen, right?
Yeah.
And by Baron Harkonnen. And so there's a part of me that's like, I wonder if he knew it wasn't going to work out. I wonder if he knew she was already dead. I wonder if he was so hopeless, but he had to try, right? As someone who doesn't have a partner in it, I'm curious if like, yeah, I mean, you are like, you're
Yeah.
like, even if you knew, it's like, well, I'm not going to just not
Yeah. You
try,
do
you
something.
know?
Yeah.
That's Kelly, right?
Yeah.
And so it was just all around just a heartbreaking it was just heartbreaking because yeah, and he just super gets killed.
And I
But
think that's the thing is the line delivery from a lot of these characters in both movies, but especially in that scene too, when Skarsgård, who's the Baron, says to the doctor, he says, "I said you could join her." And like at that
yeah,
moment, I mean, you knew, but at that moment, it's like, oh yeah, join her in death. Like these things, and I
right,
think that's what elevates both of them, both of the movies, but specifically talking about Dune One, introducing worlds, elevates them over so many sci-fi movies, especially. And I know everybody loves a good Star Wars film, but is just like the screenplay, like you said, the cinematography, introduction of worlds. For someone like you who saw it 3 years ago almost, that it pulled you in immediately. And again, a stacked cast and really fantastic actors can do that, but all the pieces have to fit, especially with sci-fi, especially with like screenplay that's adapted from a book. I mean, all the pieces
right,
have to fit to make something as incredible as they I was trying to find another word. Sorry, Sarah Warland. But trying to build what they created, to build what they built, to make what they made. I don't know. You know what I'm trying to say.
right.
But everything has to work. Otherwise, if the visuals of their helicopters are incredible. Like I loved them. I
Oh
love the
yeah,
design of that. All of it has to fit, right? It can't be cheesy. The
right.
way they sourced the spice, like that equipment. I mean, all of it just down to that, down to the design of the vehicles. Just amazing, man.
Mm,
And especially when you think about sci-fi, like Kelly and our friends will always joke with each other about because I haven't watched all the Harry Potters, and so I'll have a good conversation. I'll have a good roast session with Richard, right? With Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter, we'll poke jabs and holes at the plots in the movies or how it was made, and he'll be like, "Oh, your little lightsabers." But thinking about Dune and in the first and second movie, the way they portrayed you're gonna know the lingo probably more, the protective shields that they would each have.
mm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think they're just shields, to be
Yeah, like
honest.
the protective shields on the bodies. That was great. They could have gone a certain way that made it almost cheesy, used it a little too
Right.
much, and it was used a little bit more in the first movie, I believe, than the second movie, but the
Yeah.
way they used it was awesome. Like, down to those details, that didn't take it over the top to this like, okay, it's sci-fi, right? But bear
Right.
with me when I say to this unbelievable level where I don't know. I appreciate that. Again, being a fan of like fantasy and sci-fi and these other movies and Star Wars, which was inspired by Dune from the jump, anyways. Um, where they left enough realism or visual realism that you're not taken to this place of disbelief, I guess. I don't know.
Right.
Again, it's sci-fi, but when you put yourself in that world, it feels good the way they created it, the way they designed everything. Like just so much fun.
Right. And it might sound silly, but I think also watching this in Albuquerque and Albuquerque being a
Oh
desert
yeah.
and then relating it to Dune, like in the thinking
Yes.
about water and the preciousness of water.
Oh,
And again, not that we don't have water in Albuquerque or
exactly.
didn't have water, but it did make me think about like how, people always say, I think even Chris, what's his name? Guardians of the Galaxy guy, Chris Pratt.
Chris
Sorry,
Pratt.
I had a brain fart there. Chris Pratt's like Twitter bio at one point was like 72% water, 8% actor. Or I don't know. It said something
Yeah.
ridiculous, but I think even when people mention that we're most of our bodies made up of water, I think this movie and the world building and like yes, it's sci-fi, but it brought me in because I live in a desert,
Yeah.
because I am a human, because most of our bodies make up of water. I was thinking, do I take water for granted? Like, do I?
That's so
And
funny.
especially in the States, like, right? We get fresh water, we can like bathe in it, wash in it, we drink it. That's not true for a lot of the world, right?
Yeah.
And so I think it did in a way bring me into the story more in that sense. But and I was gonna give you a hard time. I was like, what do you mean you've never seen all of the Harry Potters? We have a whole speaking of Sarah Warland, we have a whole series on the Medium Project on the adaptation of Harry Potter. But then I thought about Carson, shout out Carson, my Twitter friend, also host of the Movie Maven, one half of the hosts of the Movie Maven, shout out Movie Mavens, always says on Twitter, like, there's so many movies out there. You should never shame yourself for not watching a certain thing. And it was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna start having grace and compassion for myself and for other people. Therefore, Eric, I'm not shaming you for not watching Harry Potter,
Thank you.
even though in a lot of ways this might be a passive way of shaming you. But um, that being said, though, I think the Dune adaptation, like you had mentioned, would make a killer episode. I need to get that with Sarah about
You should.
for the Medium Project because, dude, they are two different. They're the same story. They have the same bones, but I think the adaptation and the direction that Denis took it is pretty. There's parts of it that are pretty different, but I really appreciate them.
I'm told
And
Messiah
it's
will have
great.
someone I was reading that I haven't
Oh, you
read the
have
books, but
to.
like Messiah, you really have to really take a major shift. I said really 4 times in 5 seconds. You have to take a major shift in direction for it to work, and that's cool. That's exciting. I haven't read it,
Yeah,
but that would be cool for you guys to explore. Have you read them all?
right. I've only read Dune Part 1, or Dune book, which is
Dune.
Part 1 and Part 2. I have Messiah. I'm gonna start it over the summer. I was told by a lot of people don't read anything past Dune because it just goes downhill. But with the movie
Yeah, there's
and
like
the world, I'm
30
like,
other
I have
books
to.
from the
Yeah,
original author's son, and apparently they're
yeah,
trash. But
yep.
no disrespect, that's just what I've
Well,
heard.
the little bit I've done and heard on the internet is he wrote Dune as a cautionary tale to prophetic and messianic figures, and about how
Wow.
having prophets and having people like this in your world, because everyone sees Paul as a hero,
Mm.
and he's not a hero. He's a cautionary tale about what can happen. And when Dune came out, it was well received as a book, as a story, but also Paul as a hero. And
Mm.
Frank Herbert was like, no, you guys, like, it went, you people, like, it went over your head, the general public. And so he decided to write Dune Messiah after the fact. He's like, if you didn't get it then, you're gonna get it now.
Yeah.
Because I hear that just goes just completely AWOL.
And speaking of, you know, dipping a little bit into Dune 2, Javier Bardem, is that how you say the last name? Bardem?
Yeah, Bardem.
Just unbelievable in part 2. And again, I will not spoil, anything if you're listening, but I had all of my laughs came from his scenes. I mean, he was just so
Yes.
incredible as like this religious cult um believer to a fault. Like just I don't know, there's got to be a word or terminology to describe it, but it was amazing. And I'm sure if you're online at all, you've seen memes about it. Um in the way that if Paul, which is Timothy's character, breathed, then Javier's character, which is Stilgar, which just was like, it's the Messiah, like everything he did. And they do it so tastefully. And it was just, he's fantastic. And it is really hard to believe he's also one of the top 3 greatest on-screen villains of all time in No Country for Old Men. Like, I love
Yes.
that. I love that. I mean, it took me a second to realize that. I mean, if you haven't seen No Country for Old Men, it's fantastic. But he plays probably top 2, top 3 on-screen villains ever in that movie. And so, anyways, he's fantastic. I saw an interview where he said he did The Little Mermaid for his daughter because she wanted him to, and he did Dune because he knew his son would like it. And he's like, and I get paid either way, so I pick my movies for my kids. And I was like, cool, man, you're in. I didn't see the new Little Mermaid, but you're in Dune. There's a win right there. So,
Dude, I love that. Dude, he's a great person. He brings so much presence to the
oh, it's
screen. He's
awesome.
barely in. It feels like he's barely in part 1,
Yeah, yeah,
and he literally was commanding the whole time.
100%. Oh yeah, that final closing scene of part 1. We didn't even.
Oh yeah.
I'm thumbsing down, thumbsing up. Oh my goodness, that was a blast. Oh, and that speaking of Rebecca Ferguson, Lady Jessica, um, Javier Bardem's character Stilgar, when he is tussling with her at the end,
Yeah.
that was what is happening right now on my screen.
Explosions, fireworks,
Explosions.
dude.
That's how explosive that scene was. Um,
Yes, absolutely.
that was just incredible because he basically belittles her as like she's too old. The young boy when they're trying to take her in, he can learn. And when they tussle and she has him, he's like, "I'm sorry." That was amazing. That whole scene was
Right.
fantastic.
It was. And I think so to close out though, I think I didn't chuckle that much. There was a very small amount of laughter, but
Yeah.
I definitely dropped tears and it definitely held me in thought for years. So it is barely a full movie because of the low amount of laughter for me.
Yeah.
And I know you said that it wasn't, right?
Yeah,
Part
the
1?
first time I watched it. Like, rewatch,
Yeah.
that doesn't
So
count,
it's just
though.
fine. Yeah.
That I think also I was blown away by Timothy's performance, like, really, it just personal perspective for him shifted a lot after Dune 1. Even on my first watch, rewatch, just everybody was incredible. One person I do wanna touch on, I know we have a few minutes left. Dave Bautista,
Yep.
like,
Crushed.
just crushed this movie. Blade Runner to me is, like, an incredible testament. I know we're not talking about Blade Runner, to his acting chops because he is in it, Blade Runner 2049, for 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 7, I don't know.
Right.
And he rules the screen, man. And so, like, just thinking
Right.
of wrestler turned actor, there's The Rock and there's John Cena, all these fun movies they're in. But Dave Bautista crushes. Dune 2 as well, like you'll see him in Dune 2, but just his presence in these movies. I don't know why I brought up Dune 20 or Blade Runner 2049, but just his name, I will always remember that, man. His short on-screen presence
Yes.
with the GOAT Ryan Gosling.
Well, dude, I think a big part of that is that one, I think it was really hard for him to convince Denis to cast him because of that
Mm.
reason. And I think his commitment, there's like articles out there about his commitment to being an actor, like being a thespian. Like he wants to go all, he took acting classes, he took court, like he's studying, he wants to be seen not as an actor or as a wrestler turned actor, but as an actor. And I think he's achieved
Oh,
that very well
yeah.
because of Blade Runner 2049 is a great example of that, where he was acting and it wasn't just like a character out of Glass Onion, where he plays a character
Mm.
that you may assume that those are the kind of characters he would play
Yeah.
based on like how The Rock has entered the scene, or John, like you'd mentioned, John Cena. And not to belittle those
For
people
sure.
either. Like, they all have their place. I just think Dave Bautista working with people like Denis and working with James Gunn in Guardians of the Galaxy and having completely different characters and playing different like types of people and the range he's able to do, and then working with what's the Sixth Sense guy? Why am I
Oh,
losing
yeah, M.
his
Night
name?
and Knock at the
M
Cabin.
Night. Yes, and like he's working with a bunch of different types of directors and different genres. And so, anyways, my hat's off to him because I agree. That's a great way to. I'm glad you brought him up and wanted to highlight him because as far as even life goes, right? Like just seeing how someone committed to changing their life in real life and doing something they really enjoy and also getting praised for it, I think is really, really cool. Like, I think kudos to Dave Bautista for like just really going all in and committing to the art and the craft of filmmaking and being an actor.
And I think one thing I loved about it too, Dune 1 and 2 and part 2, is not always does an ensemble cast work and just everybody flows so beautiful. I mean, I think, okay, this is controversial. Dune Part 2 is incredible. I mean, favorite movie I've seen in theaters and I don't know how long. But Christopher Walken, he did good. But maybe you have a different perspective, but maybe that's one casting choice. When he showed up on screen, I was like, oh, anyways. But the rest, I mean, it's a great movie. He does a good job. But it's like he's emperor of the, am I? Anyways, the ensemble cast is so well, and everybody elevates each other's performances when they're together on screen. Like Lady Jessica with Rebecca Ferguson and Timothy sharing so much screen time in Dune 1 in the latter half of the movie, like in the hell. I mean,
Yeah.
just so incredible. And also obviously in Dune 2, but really everybody pulls the movie together. And it's like I talked about earlier, when you have a sci-fi movie, all movies, but specifically sci-fi because they're easy to tear apart and they're easy to criticize or brush off as far as like cinematography goes, right? Everything has to work. Everybody has to play their part. So Dune 1, you go to Dune 2, right? You have Austin Butler and Skarsgård and like the and on the villain side of things, but all the pieces fit so well. And Dave Bautista's character in part 2 fits so well in the part that he played. And so I really am a sucker for an ensemble cast that works like this. And
Yeah.
it's exciting too because like Florence Pugh, who's just like burst onto the scene in recent years and like in horror movies and Midsummer, and um she'll have a larger role, I'm told, in Messiah. Anya Joy Taylor, am I saying that right? Um,
I think so.
but
Anya Joy Taylor. Yeah.
I think Denny has said in many interviews and in different ways, right? I'm not quoting him specifically, but like basically the future of cinema is in good hands with like this young
Yes.
group of actors with like Timothy, Austin Butler, which shout out him, man, in part 2, but and Florence and Anya Joy Taylor, and because we just watched The Menu the other night. That's right. She popped into
Oh,
my head
nice.
because of
Yeah.
that, and then I know she'll supposedly have a role in Messiah. And so an ensemble cast that works, young actors coming onto the scene, and like, and we talked about Tom Cruise saving cinema with Top Gun. This was a fun experience, man. And tying it all together with like the Oscars the other day, it was a fun year. There's always a controversial winner, something that happens. Will Smith slap last year. This year was fun. Going to the movies in the last, I think, 12 months has been so fun since
Yes.
Oppenheimer and Barbie and that competition, and like Emily Blunt and Ryan Gosling doing a little bit on stage at the Oscars of like riding each other's coattails, and the awards, and then the Dune experience, right? Seeing a movie, to me, for the first time in a long time, have a handful of movies that the consensus is they're great. And again, there's like controversy that can find itself in most movies, but we've had a really good run of movies in theaters that like are critically acclaimed, box office success, and social media loves them. Like those three things do not always happen, right? And none
Right.
of it's really important, but for me, it's so much fun. Like getting online and reading reviews and digging too much into something that doesn't need to be dug into. But it made good money. Everybody performed really well, and they won awards. Like it's just a fun time to be a movie lover, man. That's what I'll say.
Dude, I 100% agree, and I think that that's what my encouragement for Dune Part 1. I'm like, go definitely watch Dune
Yes.
Part 1,
Yes.
but for anything, watch Dune Part 1 so you can watch Dune Part 2 in theaters.
Mm,
Like I am a theater person, like I like going to the cinema for most
yeah.
movies, but I think like you're saying, this previous run and this year and the upcoming movies that are coming, it's reminding me like, oh, it's not just, oh, I like to watch movies in the theater, but like, oh, these we're getting movies where it's like these are excellent uh theater experiences. Like
Yes.
I don't know the last time I've had like Dune Part 2 and watching Dune Part 1 like in theaters was just, it changed my life. No. But I I just remember leaving just being so captivated by Dune Part 1 when I watched it in theaters. And so this was another reminder of Dune Part 2, but I think it is an excellent time to be excited for movies, which again is a nice way to shamelessly plug our newsletter, Sweet and Condensed, where the team puts together. We watch a movie in theaters every week, and we let you know, is this movie worth watching in theaters or not, or how much is this worth watching in theaters on a scale, right? And so, if you're one of those people that's like, I don't know if I should or shouldn't watch movies in the theaters, it's a good year to be a movie lover, and it's a good year to sign up for Sweet and Condensed, because we will let you know, as well as some other ridiculous takes about cinema and snacks and etiquette and just some ideas and thoughts. And then also the watch list is what's exciting for me too. Is like,
Yep.
even since it's a team based thing, dude, I read the last one with Kung Fu Panda, and I forgot that we had watch list worthy because I didn't do anything for it. That it was all New Mexico Drew, and I was like, the Wild Robot, Lilo, and the creator of Lilo and Stitch, and he's making a movie that is giving us Iron Giant vibe. So, anyways, it was even a surprise for me as I read it, because I was like, oh yeah, I forgot we have this. So
That's incredible.
we're hopefully going to be putting movies on your radar about which ones are going to make good movie theater watches.
Yes. I don't know. The newsletter is a lot of fun. So tune in as we wrap up. Anything else closing you want to say other than plugging the newsletter, sending Josh $5 via Venmo? Anything else?
Dude, just 5-star ratings, reviews, 1 star if you must, but nothing in between. Dude, we have like 5 5-star on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify.
Let's go.
They're coming in. They might be a minimal, but they're quality. We're looking for quality over quantity here. So we appreciate. Shout out to all the people out there dropping 5 stars, who are taking the time to write reviews. Shout out to the people subscribing. We've reached like 34 subscribers. So we're in the 30s now as far as subscribers to the newsletter. And then, yeah, just, dude, overall, just shout out the whole, we've reached 400 listens overall and living a stream. That's just exciting. Yeah, just keep listening, keep living, keep streaming. Movie theaters are back. Go to the cinema.
Back, baby.